If one day you opened your news app and saw a headline that read, "The richest billionaire in America has just bought a private army and unilaterally marched it into the Middle East to start his own personal war," not the US military, no act of Congress, no direct threat to the homeland, just the ego of one man who's too rich and desperate to be remembered by history as a hero. What would you think? Insane? Impossible? Stuff like that only happens in movies. 2,000 years ago, Rome actually let that happen. The richest man in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus, a kind of ancient real estate billionaire, decided to use his money and influence to launch his own private war in the Middle East, just to chase glory and keep up with the two other political superstars in the system. No treaty had been broken. No Roman city had been attacked. There was only one thing driving it: the hunger for personal glory and the illusion that the strongest army in the world couldn't possibly lose to anyone, especially not to some Eastern horseman. The result? More than 40,000 men crossed the river. Only about 10,000 ever made it back. And from that desert, the divine armor Romans had wrapped around their republic began to crack and peel away, pushing the whole system onto a track it could never really get off again. Carrhae on the map is just a tiny dot on the edge of the desert. But in Roman history and in the entire history of the Roman Empire, it was the first slip that knocked the entire Republican machine off its rails. To understand Rome, all you really have to do is picture a United States from 2,000 years ago, a superpower with the strongest military on Earth, the most advanced legal system, and a network of roads that tied the known world together, like an ancient version of the internet. Goods, information, and power all flowed toward Rome, the same way the modern world once seemed to flow toward Washington. And at the heart of that machine were the legions, professional soldiers with iron discipline, the ancient equivalent of the US Army plus the Marines. Wherever the legions set foot, Rome won. To the peoples of the ancient world, Rome was almost untouchable. The way many nations today look at America, but just like America, absolute power came with absolute politics. And Roman politics at that moment revolved around three men. The first triumvirate, Washington, D.C., circa 52 BC. Three men shaking hands to control the whole system, not the Senate, not the Republic, just them. Pompey, the military rock star, hero of the masses, basically a celebrity general of the ancient world. Caesar, a political genius and master strategist, admired by many, feared by everyone. Three men, three centers of extreme power, and one secret deal to divide the world between them. Sound like a shadow power circle in Washington? Because at its core, that's exactly what it was. And when politics is run by three egos, what happens when one of them decides he deserves more? Rome found out, and it paid the price in blood. Marcus Licinius Crassus wasn't just rich. He was the measuring stick for wealth in Rome. His fortune stretched from massive silver mines to sprawling estates, to hundreds of buildings right in the capital. He even owned a private army of slave firefighters. But they weren't some public service fire department. They operated like snipers on the real estate market. When a house caught fire, they'd rush over, stand in front of the screaming homeowner and say, "Sell it to us cheap and we'll put the fire out." If the owner refused, they would just stand there and watch it burn to the ground, then buy the ruins for even less. Crassus built his empire on other people's ashes, smoke-stained houses bought for pennies, confiscated property from political enemies, ruins turned into revenue. But deep down, Crassus understood a painful truth. In a culture that worshiped military victory, he was just the money guy, the man who wrote the checks for someone else's glory. He watched Pompey parade through Rome after conquering the East. He watched Caesar send back letter after letter from Gaul, each one announcing another victory. Everyone talked about Pompey and Caesar as military geniuses. And Crassus, people just knew him as the richest man in town. And you know what made that hurt even more? Pompey and Caesar both needed him because only Crassus had the money to fund their campaigns. But Crassus didn't want to be the donor in the dark behind the spotlight. He wanted that spotlight turned directly on him. On the far side of the Euphrates, facing Rome, it wasn't some blank space on the map. It was an ancient Iran-Afghanistan, the Parthian Empire. But Parthia was not some poor, chaotic backwater. It was the direct heir of the old Persian Empire, stretching from the Euphrates almost all the way to India, a true superpower by ancient standards. The Parthians came from nomadic roots. They grew up on horseback, lived on the steppe, and fought in a style that massive empires like Rome had never really learned how to handle. High-mobility cavalry, horse archers, hit, fade, disappear like the hot winds of the desert. This was not the barbarian enemy Rome imagined. Parthia had structure, strategy, and a clear military tradition. And on top of that, it sat on a wealthy economy, with its capital at Ctesiphon, one of the most prosperous cities of the ancient world. Not some borderland, but a major center of civilization in the ancient Middle East. In Crassus's eyes, Parthia, a golden opportunity. To him, Mesopotamia looked like a giant treasure chest. Rich cities, overflowing treasuries, fat trade routes just waiting for Roman hands to grab them, and finally push Pompey's shadow out of the public's mind. Crassus was convinced Parthia could never stand up to the discipline and formation of the Roman legions, and that confidence slowly hardened into blindness. In other words, this wasn't a war the Roman state needed. It was a private adventure Crassus wanted, a choice a lot of Americans today might find very familiar. A war not fought for national survival, but to feed the ego of the man holding power. Crassus's tragedy didn't begin in the desert. It began the moment he decided he was right and everyone else was wrong. First warning layer, the bad omens. Right before the campaign, the Roman augurs, basically the risk assessment office of the ancient world, studied the entrails of the sacrificial animals and saw nothing but bad signs. They told Crassus the gods did not bless this campaign, that this was the worst possible time to drag an army east. Crassus listened and brushed it off. He believed in money, not in gods. Second warning layer, the curse on the banks of the Euphrates. When he reached the Euphrates, the natural border between Rome and Parthia, a tribunus plebis, a legally elected representative of the Roman people, stood right on the riverbank, raised his hand, and loudly proclaimed a formal curse from the Roman state. Whoever crosses this river without just cause will carry the dark fate the gods have decreed. It was the kind of scene that would make any sane Roman commander hesitate, but not Crassus. He stared straight ahead and stepped into the river. From that moment on, it wasn't just the Roman army crossing the Euphrates, it was Crassus's ego crossing a line it could never uncross. Crassus crossed the Euphrates for the first time, with a force any Roman general would envy. 7 legions, about 42,000 men. That was enough muscle to crush most kingdoms in the Middle East, and just like he expected, at the beginning everything felt almost suspiciously easy. Victory came so fast, nobody even had time to blink. Crassus marched into Mesopotamia and grabbed a string of cities one after another. No major battles, no face-to-face showdowns, no meaningful resistance. The Parthian army just disappeared. They pulled out of the cities, avoided engagement, and simply stepped aside. To Crassus, that was a clear sign of weakness. They don't dare face the legions. But the truth was the exact opposite. Parthia wasn't weak at all. They were watching. They were waiting. They were luring Crassus farther and farther from his supplies, from favorable terrain, and from everything a heavy Roman infantry army depended on. They knew they couldn't fight Rome on Rome's terms, so they chose not to fight. Crassus never saw the strategy. To him, this was nothing more than a walkthrough campaign. He pulled his troops back to Syria for the winter and convinced himself, next year, just one more campaign, and Parthia will collapse. In Crassus's mind, there was only one possible ending. Roman victory was guaranteed, and Parthia was just dragging out the humiliation of losing. But history has a lesson Crassus refused to learn. History is full of generals who mistake the enemy's patience for weakness, and Crassus was about to pay for that lesson. In the harshest classroom the ancient Middle East could offer, the Mesopotamian desert, If Crassus is the face of arrogance, then the man standing across from him, Surena, is everything Rome never wanted to admit. A military genius from outside the so-called civilized world, Surena. 30 years old aristocrat, strategist, politician, and a full-on showman. At 30, most Romans were still junior officers. Surena was playing in a completely different league. He came from a family so old and powerful that they had one special job reserved just for them. They were the ones who physically placed the crown on the head of every new Parthian king. He was nobility. He was a general. He was a man with serious political weight. And most importantly, he was a razor-sharp strategist. Surena was smart, bold, wired into crowd psychology, and he even understood the power of spectacle. He's the kind of character American viewers recognize instantly. The guy who's so talented that people respect him, and kings quietly fear him. The Parthian plan, simple, elegant, deadly. King Orodes II knew Rome was strong. He also knew Crassus was trying to line up an alliance with Armenia. So Orodes personally marched north to deal with Armenia first, cutting off the reinforcements Crassus was counting on, and the main front in Mesopotamia, he handed that to Surena. There was just one problem. Surena had to face an army 4 to 5 times his size. But Orodes trusted him, and history proved he was right. Surena's force was only cavalry, but the kind that gives Rome nightmares. Surena assembled around 10,000 cavalry, split into 2 parts. First, 1,000 cataphracts, heavy shot cavalry, massive warriors wrapped in full metal armor. Their armor gleamed like scales. Their horses were armored too, and they carried lances as long as flagpoles. When they charged, it wasn't a simple attack. It was a controlled car crash made of flesh and steel. Second, 9,000 mounted archers, fast, agile, firing at full gallop, and using the classic Parthian trick, shooting backward while retreating. The move history later called the Parthian shot. If you want to picture Surena's army in modern terms, imagine a force made of 1,000 human tanks and 9,000 Apache helicopters, except everything runs on horses. That's what Crassus was about to run into, and it was something he absolutely did not understand. In the spring of 53 BC, Crassus crossed the Euphrates a second time. This time, he wasn't looking to probe anymore. He wanted a straight line to Ctesiphon, the golden heart of Parthia, with one clear objective: hit fast, hit hard, end the war in a single campaign. In Crassus's mind, Parthia was just the final obstacle between him and the grand stage of history. The sensible route any other commander would have taken, except Crassus. Local guides begged him to march along the Euphrates. It was the safe route. There was water, there were trees for shade, there were supply points, and there was a clear line of retreat if anything went wrong. Everyone could see that was the rational path. Crassus didn't. Or more accurately, he didn't want to. Enter Ariamnes, the guide Surena planted. While the Romans were still debating, an Arab chieftain named Ariamnes showed up, acting loyal, eager, and expert on the desert. In reality, he was Surena's inside man, and Ariamnes made an offer. That sounded like honey in Crassus's ears. A desert route that was shorter, Parthian forces supposedly in chaotic retreat, a chance to catch them before they could regroup. Crassus only heard one phrase: chaotic retreat. To him, that was proof Parthia was weak. To Surena, it was bait. Crassus chose the desert. From that moment on, he was no longer running his own campaign. He was walking straight down the path Surena had drawn for him. The Mesopotamian desert was unlike any battlefield Rome had ever seen. Heat like an open furnace, water running low, armor turning into lead on men's backs, soldiers gasping for breath after every mile. No trees, no villages, no shelter, no anchor point. The landscape was terrifyingly flat, a giant, endless tabletop. The rank and file started to complain. The officers began to doubt. But Crassus still clung to one belief: the enemy is running. Crassus had no idea he'd been led into a giant killing field, and Parthian cavalry, Those ancient Apache helicopters were already in position, just waiting to pull the trigger. The desert opened up in front of them, and Parthia finally appeared, not as a massive army, not as a wall of spears or a roaring cavalry charge, just as scattered silhouettes on horseback, gliding lightly at a distance, circling, never closing in. But Crassus was convinced this was the moment everything would end. Deployment Rome builds its wall of steel. Crassus ordered his men into a massive hollow square. Thousands of shields locked together, spears bristling outward like a forest of iron. This was the formation that had crushed the Gauls, broken the Germanic tribes, conquered Spain, Greece, Macedonia, Syria. In Roman eyes, this was the one thing on earth no enemy could ever break, and they believed in it completely, right up until that day. Parthian tactics: hit, fade, hit again. The moment the Romans advanced, the Parthian horse archers began to move. Not by charging, not by closing in, but by riding in wide circles around the Roman block. Huge orbits of cavalry, always just out of reach. They stayed at that perfect distance where Rome couldn't hit them, but Parthia could hit Rome. Arrow after arrow screamed out from powerful composite bows, their draw weight far beyond anything used by European tribes at the time. The arrows fell like rain. The Romans turtled up into Testudo, the famous tortoise formation, a shell of shields so tight, even sunlight struggled to get through. But Testudo had one fatal flaw. Once it stopped moving, it was just a stationary target. The Parthian archers never stopped firing, never stopped moving. And most importantly, they never ran out of arrows, because right behind them, a train of camels loaded with quivers kept the ammo flowing nonstop. This wasn't a battle. This was an open shooting range, and Rome was standing in the middle of it. Psychology: Rome's first taste of asymmetric warfare. This was the moment everything broke. Roman soldiers had never fought like this before. They were used to enemies, charging straight at them, to the clash of metal on metal, to the comfort of knowing that if you were brave in close combat, you could win. But today, their enemy never came close, never locked shields, never let themselves get grabbed, never gave Rome a chance to hit back. They just shot and shot. Roman soldiers were wounded without even knowing who had hit them. They died without ever seeing the face of the man who killed them. It was a kind of warfare totally alien to Rome and painfully familiar to a modern audience. Asymmetric, hit and run, an enemy you can't touch. For the first time, Rome was facing an opponent who refused to play by Roman rules. An army whose deadliest weapon wasn't the bow itself, but the freedom to choose the distance. At Carrhae, Crassus finally understood, but far too late, that he wasn't fighting an army. He was fighting a strategy. Crassus had had enough. In his mind, Parthia only had one trick: shoot and run. And to finally end this cat-and-mouse game, he played what he thought was his trump card. He sent his son Publius into the fight. Publius was young, brave, a veteran who had fought under Caesar in Gaul. Crassus was so proud of him that he truly believed if anyone could break Parthia, it had to be his boy. He handed Publius 1,300 elite Gallic cavalry, 500 archers, 8 cohorts of light infantry, about 4,000 men in total. The mission sounded brutally simple: chase them down, force them into close combat, and end this war. What Crassus didn't know was that he had just sent his son charging straight into a script Surinna had written long before. The moment Publius surged forward, the Parthian horse archers pretended to panic and flee. Dust plumes exploded into the sky. Shouts, hooves, chaos. Everything looked and sounded like a routed enemy on the brink of collapse. Publius believed it. He believed it too fast, and too completely. He spurred his men to chase, farther and farther, until they were out of sight of the main Roman army. That was the moment Surinna had been waiting for. From behind towering sand dunes, as if the desert itself were giving birth to them, 1,000 Parthian cataphracts appeared. War horses wrapped in metal scales, riders armored head to toe, lances as long as wooden poles. They didn't charge like men. They collided like tanks made of flesh and steel. The first impact tore through Publius' line, like thunder exploding right in their faces. The Gauls, wild and fearless, tried hacking at the horse's legs, but steel doesn't feel pain. They tried to knock aside the lances, but distance, weight, and armor turned every effort into nothing. Meanwhile, from the outer ring, 9,000 horse archers kept raining arrows. Into the tightly packed Roman formation, encirclement, arrow storm, cavalry charge. Repeat. At some point, it stopped being a battle. It became an execution. Publius was hit by more than one arrow. One through the thigh, one through the shoulder, one buried in his shield. He stayed on his feet, kept commanding, kept shouting through blood and dust. But there was no way out. No reinforcements, no formation left to rebuild, no hope. He turned to his most loyal bodyguard and gave the last order of his life. An order no father, no soldier ever wants to give or hear. Finish me before they take me. The bodyguard obeyed and died shortly after. Moments later, Parthian soldiers cut off Publius' head and mounted it on a spear. Surena smiled. He knew this one moment would shatter Roman morale more than any number of arrows. From a distance, Crassus saw a massive cloud of dust where his son had disappeared. He sent reinforcements, but they went out too late, too far, too foolish. When the survivors finally staggered back and told him how Publius had died, it was as if someone had drained the life out of Crassus himself. For the first time in his life, Debrayer Ihir the Sirzawan, a man who had never been denied anything, understood a brutal truth. The richest man in Rome has finally found something he cannot buy back. Not gold, not glory, not respect, but the life of his own son. As the sun went down after the disaster of Publius, night didn't fall like rest. It fell like a death sentence. The retreat to Carrhae the night Rome lost its soul. The Roman army ran through the dark. No formation, no order, no hope. Around them were thousands of corpses, the groans of the wounded, and a burning thirst so bad Roman soldiers were licking dew off their shields. Crassus gave the order to retreat to Carrhae, but to do that, he had to make the most ruthless decision of his life. He left more than 4,000 wounded behind. In a culture that prided itself on never abandoning a comrade, this was the moment Rome betrayed its own ideals. An empire doesn't start dying when its enemies stab it from the outside, but from the second it stops living up to the values it shouts to the world. At first light, the Parthians came back to the battlefield. The Roman wounded, no shields, no strength to run, no officers left, were all slaughtered where they lay. No mercy, no prisoners, no political theater. This was the message Surena sent to Crassus. Rome doesn't get to set the terms out here anymore. The survivors who did reach Carrhae found out the hard way that this fortress was never built to hold a shattered army. They had no water, no clear way out, and no morale. It wasn't a fortress, it was a box. Surena knew that and decided to end the whole thing without firing another arrow. He sent envoys. If Rome gives up all the territory east of the Euphrates, I'll let you withdraw in safety. Crassus saw through the trick. He wanted to refuse, but the Roman officers, exhausted, panicked, broken, forced his hand. We don't have a choice anymore. That one sentence has killed more civilizations than any sword. Crassus went to meet Surena. Both sides were tense, full of suspicion. All it took was one shout, one shove, one misunderstanding, and chaos exploded. No one really remembered who struck first, but the Romans were overwhelmed almost instantly. Crassus was dragged from his horse and killed in a whirl of dust and confusion. No final speech, no heroic last stand, no glow of glory, just an ending that fit, a spectacularly bad decision. According to several ancient sources, Surena then ordered molten gold to be poured into Crassus' mouth. A perfect piece of dark irony. You died by the very thing you worshiped, not by Parthia, not by tactics, but by greed. It was a moment history refused to waste. A man who worshipped gold, dying with gold flowing out of his mouth. A brutal lesson in arrogance. The Parthians sent Crassus' head to King Orodes II, Germanchonon, It arrived at the exact moment the king was watching a performance of the Bacchae by Euripides. In the climactic scene, when the character lifts up the severed head of his enemy, the actor walked on stage, holding the real head of Crassus. The audience roared with laughter. The entire court roared with laughter. History laughed with them. This empire is just flesh and bone. From the moment those legionary eagles were paraded as trophies, the Romans understood that the rest of the world had now seen them bleed. Politics shaken when one link snaps, the whole machine comes apart. Crassus' death didn't just erase the name of one general. It erased the balance of power that held the entire republic together. The first triumvirate shattered overnight. Pompey and Caesar no longer had anyone to hold them in check. Personal grudges turned into political rivalry. Political rivalry cracked the whole system. From there, everything sped up. Civil war erupted. Caesar marched his legions across the Rubicon. Pompey was defeated, and in barely a single generation, the Roman Republic gave way to the Roman Empire. A polarized politics, a power-sharing pact blown apart, a pointless war. That's the price a republic pays, when the decision to go to war slips by without any real public debate. And the result? Tens of thousands of citizens dead, Rome's reputation torn to shreds, its political system fractured, and the entire republic pushed onto a road it could never turn back from. Rome didn't fall in one day. Sometimes it just takes one man to push it over the edge. And now this story isn't stuck out in the Mesopotamian desert anymore. It's sitting right in front of us. Because when you look at Carrhae, you don't just see Rome's past. You see a pattern every superpower in any era can fall into. The questions Rome never asked until it was too late. How many times has history replayed the same script? A great power convinced it will always have the upper hand. An elite class too rich, too insulated to be challenged. A handful of people deciding on war, while everyone else only finds out when the bill comes due. Sound familiar? An American audience will know exactly what you're pointing at, without you ever having to say the name. You don't have to spell it out. Just lay out the pattern, underestimating the enemy, assuming they're primitive, outmatched, right up until their tactics go beyond what you train for. Not understanding the terrain, the culture, the way the other side fights, thinking the war will be quick, clean, easy, and then getting bogged down in something you never prepared for. Believing money plus attack plus manpower, caution, guaranteed victory, and forgetting that war is ultimately a test of minds, not just muscle. Rome believed it was the only hunter on the world map. Then an army of just 10,000 horsemen shredded 42,000 of its elite troops. From that day on, they stopped treating arrogance as just a character flaw and started seeing it as a real enemy. Carrhae sends a message that cuts across 2,000 years of history across the entire history of the Roman Empire. Money can't buy judgment. Power doesn't make you immune to mistakes. No military machine is safe from humiliation. And a chain of bad decisions, each leader at the top giving in just a little, can drag an entire system down. When a republic lets life or death decisions be made by a class that is too rich, too arrogant, too convinced it's always right, Carrhae stops being a Roman story and becomes a warning label for any nation that thinks it is immune to collapse. And if you had to wrap the whole tragedy of Carrhae into a single line, it would be this: Rome didn't fall at Carrhae, but that's the day history proved. Rome could bleed. Empires don't collapse in one night. They wear down through bad decisions, unnecessary wars, and leaders who are convinced they can't be wrong. So think about it for a second. Do you think the United States is repeating Rome's mistakes? In this story, who do you feel closer to? The Roman soldier pushed into the desert by the decisions of the rich, the Parthian horseman, the smaller player who actually understands the game, or the ordinary people stuck between two empires? Who never wanted this war in the first place? Drop a comment. I want to hear how you see the world right now. If you like the way we tell history, as if a whole civilization were looking into a mirror at itself from the entire history of the Roman Empire, to the rise and fall of modern powers. Hit like so. YouTube knows you want more. Subscribe so you don't miss the next stories about empires, power, and the decisions that rewired history. And share this video if you think someone you know needs to hear this warning. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, every empire thinks it's eternal, right up until history proves the opposite.